Are we going? Are we here? Are we doing it? Okay. I realized I didn't rethread my machine. So while you guys are getting here, I'm going to rethread my machine. I did remember to wind a new bobbin. So that's good. So I'm starting with a full bobbin. And now I'm threading my machine. So good morning. Good morning. Welcome to Sew Together Tuesday. Look at that. All right. So now I've got my machine threaded. I'll put my new bobbin in. I'll be ready to go. Good morning. It's Sew Together Tuesday. I'm Teresa. And today we are doing a special edition. In fact, this whole week we're doing a special edition. This is our kids' Cuddle Camp this week. So we're doing specifically kid-friendly patterns. We'll start talking about those in just half a second. Just make sure I've got everything set up, ready to go. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I wound my whole bobbin because if you watch regularly, you know a couple weeks ago I ran out of bobbin. Very close to the end, so that was exciting. So we're back. Welcome. Today we're going to be doing, like I said, a special edition. We're doing this whole week. So for the next 3 days, we are focusing on the Quilt Cadet patterns is what we're working with. So Quilt Cadets is from Latifa Safir, and you may be familiar with her. Moms might be familiar with her. And she is working together with Little Pincushion Studio for several of these patterns, including the one we're doing today, which is the Enchanted Travel Pillow. So today we're doing the unicorn version. I'm pretty excited about it because this was really, really cute. So the thing that I like about her patterns is that they're specifically for children, okay? So if you're a kid and you're sewing with this, you're going to be able to read this pattern and understand what she's talking about, which I think is great. So it's a really good skill builder, has a whole bunch of really basic information in here, the things that you're going to learn, and then the patterns. So in each one, you get a whole bunch of little things, including these patterns, okay? So the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to cut these guys out. If I can open this up for you, I'll show you. So the patterns come like this. You're just going to cut it out, just like she'll tell you, and then you're going to match, okay? You're going to match pieces. I realize I don't know where my eyeball pattern is, and I should find that before we get to that part. So all the patterns come in here. This pattern has a dragon version and a unicorn version, okay? So the body is the same for whether it's a unicorn or a dragon. And then it has other pieces that will tell you if it's a dragon piece or if it's a unicorn piece. It'll tell you which one it is. Yeah, and I just realized that I made the unicorn eye, and then I don't know what I did with that piece. So I'm going to have to find it, okay? Either that or I'm going to cut out a new one. So the patterns are really great. They're super kid-friendly. They're really easy to follow along. So we're just going to follow along with what she did in the pattern. So I'm going to kind of go through all the steps of making the pillow today. And then if you're going to make it along with me, you can watch this again when it's over. And then each step you can stop and do that step and then come back and start it again and watch the next step. And so you can sew along with me later, okay? Because we're just going to sew it together really fast today. All right, so I've got some pieces sewn. Oh, before I forget, we're doing a giveaway, so we're going to give away 5 kits today. We're going to do that every day. We're going to give 5 away. And you'll get the pattern, and you'll get fabric, and you'll get these fun little things that Latifa sent extra. So she sent these little stickers, these little cards, so no grown-ups allowed, which I think is great. Okay, little stickers. This is the bag we're going to make tomorrow. And then these cute little merit badges, which I think are awesome. So this one, it says it's for straight line quilting, but really it's for sewing with Cuddle, because this is your walking foot, okay? And we're going to need that today. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is get out all of our pieces cut. So I'm going to look right here and see if I hung my eyeball pattern up. Oh, I did. I was thinking I might have. Now I got to see if I found the other piece. See, this is what happens when I sort of keep track of things. Really good at that. Okay, so I'll need a black piece for that too. Totally spaced that, guys. Okay, so I've got one piece cut. I'm going to show you how to cut it. So Cuddle is the fabric that we're using today, and Cuddle is a knit fabric. And so it's the pattern calls for fleece, which is also a kind of knit, but it's different than what we're working with today. The Cuddle is softer, So there's that. But there's going to be a couple things we do differently because it's a different fabric. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find my pattern. I cut it out already. I taped it together. So you can see I just taped it right down the middle, made it a whole big piece. When I'm cutting out Cuddle, what I want to do is I want to trace the piece and then I want to cut it out. Okay, so, and I'm going to put it on the back side of it. And the reason we do that is because Cuddle likes to move a lot. And so I like to trace it and then I can just cut on those lines a lot easier than trying to keep the paper stuck to it. All right, so I'm going to pin this in just a couple places and then I'm going to trace around it. Okay, and if you have any questions, pop in, ask them, I'll answer them. And we'll go from there, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a regular old pen and I'm going to trace all the way around this. Okay, if I can get it to start writing. There we go. Okay, and I don't really care if my lines aren't perfectly straight because I'll be able to cut them okay. And then this goes on the inside. So it's a little crooked, it's okay. Okay, if I write on my pattern, it's okay too. I'm just going to trace all the way around. You can see I have to kind of hold it in place. I could use more pins, but I don't really want to right now. It's easier just to use my hand. Okay, so I messed up a little. Just go back and fix it. Come back around. Okay, almost back to where I started. All right, and then what I want to do is make sure that I include these marks in here. Okay, so I'm just going to lift my paper up just a little bit and get them in here. Okay, so if I were going to do the dragon, then I would mark this, but I'm not doing the dragon. I'm doing the unicorn today. So I'm going to put a little mark right here and a little mark right here. Okay, so I'm actually going to write on here so I can remember that this is where the horn goes. All right, and that this right here is where the ear goes. All right, so I have a 3/8 inch seam allowance on here, so it means that all of these words and marks will get hidden inside, so it's okay to write on it. Okay, so then I'll take my pins out and then I'll cut this. Okay, so now I've got my lines drawn, so now it'll be easier to cut because I don't have to try to cut around the paper because the paper will want to move and then it's hard to keep a straight line. And so if I just mark it first, then I can cut it. I have huge scissors and your scissors are probably smaller, but they'll work the same way. Okay, so we try to cut it when it's laying down so it doesn't move too much while you're cutting it. Okay, and because this one has lots of curves, I'm not going to use the rotary cutter, okay, which you might have seen people use, but it's sharp and it's good for straight lines. Okay, so come back around here. If I don't cut it perfect, it's okay. Okay, and I'm just going to keep moving this so that it's easy to cut. Okay, so when I get a big chunk like this, I can just cut it off and throw it away. All right, and I'll just keep cutting. So this is what you're going to do. We're also going to cut out the other ear piece, and then I need to do the eye piece because I totally forgot it has an eyeball. Okay. Turn this, make it easier for myself. Okay. So on your machine, you should have your machine set up so that you can sew. And when we do, you're going to need a walking foot. And the reason we need a walking foot is to make it sew better. So make sure you have your machine set up with your walking foot. And then you're going to need polyester thread and a 90/14 stretch needle. Okay? And whoever is helping you sew can help you figure that out. All right. So you saw, I just shake it off, make a mess. It's okay. Probably, you know, ask permission to throw the mess on the floor first. Okay. Oh, I needed to cut that other piece. So now I've got my two pieces that'll be for the body. Okay. And then I'm going to have a little piece that I use. I'm just going to use a little scrap here. Okay, and you can see I can pet the fabric. You can probably see it kind of messes up. When I go this way, it's nice and smooth. When I go this way, it kind of messes up because this is my top and this is my bottom. So it'll always go from top to bottom. Oops. It'll go nice and smooth. Okay, so that's the way I want to lay my ear on there, is top to bottom. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to show you how I do that with a rotary cutter though. I'm going to put my pin in here. And then I'm just going to cut it. Okay, so this one takes a little bit more practice, but works pretty well. Okay, and this is extra good for straight lines. Like the curves are a little harder. Okay, so now I've got my 2 ears. I've got my body. I've got my, this is for the unicorn horn. And for this one, I use the Sparkle Cuddle, which is super fun. It's got some extra glitter to it, which is great. If you haven't seen this stuff before, you have to give it a shot. It's kind of amazing how soft it is, even with the glitter on it. Okay, so I have one of those, and it tells me right here that I need to cut one of them. Okay, told me I need to cut 2 ears. Did that. Okay, that's that piece. Then I cut the mane, and there's a couple of different ways that you can cut the mane. Okay, so this is a fun fabric that we have. I think it's called Spectrum. Now the name kind of disappeared out of my head, but I cut it so that it's actually a little bit sideways, so I get all these little lines in there. And that's the way I did our sample that I did already. Okay, so all of these little guys got cut so that they're just one color along here. Okay, so that's the way I cut them. When I did the one that we're going to use today, I cut it a little bit differently. So this one, so that's the way this one is cut out of this pattern. Okay, and then this one I cut a little differently. So we're going to see how that one works. Okay, so I'm excited about that. So that'll be our mane for today. So the thing that you do with that is you're going to cut it out, and then you're going to draw a line. Okay, and then you cut all your fringe. So when I did it the first time, I decided I wasn't going to cut the fringe first because I thought it was a waste of time to do it first. But I found out then you have to, because it makes it lay in there better. Okay, so cut the fringe and then we'll sew it together. All right, so we'll do that. And then I need to cut the eyeball. I can't believe I forgot that. Okay, black. Do you see black somewhere in here, Hawk? Oh, there we go. There's got to be some in here somewhere. Okay, here's my little eyeball. So this one I'm actually going to use, I'm going to try to find which way is top to bottom. So I do the same thing. So I'm going to pet it, pet it. If I pet it this way and this way, it's smooth, but this way is top. That's from the bottom. Okay, so here's my top. So I'm going to turn it over. And an easy way, if I can find this, for me to remember is I'll write a T up here for the top. So when it's on the back, it's easy to remember because I can pet it and be like, yeah, that's the top. So I'll write a little T for the top. Okay, now I'm going to use a little silver Sharpie here, and I'm going to trace around this. Okay, and this works really well on the black, because if you use black on here, can't see it. Okay. All right, close enough. Okay, so now I'm going to use little scissors because the little scissors will be easier for this little bitty thing. So I'm just going to cut this guy out, and we'll sew him on later. Okay, so just cut all the way around it. Then I'll do the same thing and give it a good shake. If you want to, when you're doing all of these, you can cut out all of your pieces and then go put them in the dryer with a wet washcloth and let it tumble around in the dryer for a few minutes, and you'll get rid of all of your dust. Okay, which is the nice word for use for all the mess we make. Okay, so let me give that a little flick, get the little bits off. Careful you don't flick your own finger. Okay, all right, so now we got that piece. So I'm actually thinking, so on this one, I use this little blue color for his eyeball. And I'm trying to think of what color I want to use for this one's eyeball. I think I might use a pink, if I can find one. Let's see, I've got to have one somewhere. There's so many colors. There's so many colors. Okay, hold on. I think I have one over here. Okay, just want to use the right kind. So all of this is the flat cuddle, is what we call it. It's cuddle 3. The little eyeball piece is lost somewhere. I don't know what I did with it, but I do know it's the size of my magnet. So that's what I'm going to use this time, is my little magnet here. Oops. I'll hold that down, trace around it, and then I'll cut around that. Okay. Super easy, so don't lose your pieces. Okay, and I find it easier if I just cut off those extra bits when I'm cutting things because they get big and heavy. Okay, so come around here, cut it, do the same thing, give it a little flick. Okay, pull some of that off. Get rid of the cuddle dust. There, we've got an eyeball. Okay, all right. Whew, now we got all our pieces. All right, so we've got our eyes, our mane, our body. Now we can start sewing. All right, are there any questions? Is everybody doing okay out there? Okay, we said we were gonna leave prizes. Did I tell them to leave their favorite color? Oh gosh, I'm sorry guys. Leave your favorite color. Tell us what your favorite color of cuddle is, and then you'll be entered to win, okay? That's how we're going to draw the prize. So you got to leave a comment. Tell us what your favorite color is. Okay, so what I want to do is I'm going to put my little eyeball to the side. So I'm actually going to stick a little pin through it here. Stick a pin right in his eye. Okay, I'm going to put this over to the side so I don't lose it. All right, because I'm going to deal with that later. And then I'm going to do some sewing. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to make the horn and I want to make the ears. And I kind of make them the same way, but just a little different. Okay, so what I do with the horn is I'm going to fold that in half and then I'm going to pin it. Okay, and the way I like to pin when I sew with cuddle is I pin along the edge. Okay, so I hold this whole area down flat. Okay. And now I'm going to start sewing in here. Now, I'm going to show you a little trick if I can find a piece of fabric I can use. I might just sew with a little piece of cuddle to start with, okay? Because what we have there is a sharp little point. And what happens is that's hard to get sewing, okay? So when I want to start sewing, this will often get sucked down into the machine. So I'm going to do something called, it's called a leader ender or spider, or all sorts of things. But we're going to start sewing this and then I'll sew on here. Okay, so these are going to be my things I'm going to sew in order. So I'm going to sew this, then I'm going to sew this, and then I'm going to sew my ears. Okay, so I have 2 ears together here. And so I want these to match. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pin right in the point so that my points match. Okay, and then I'm going to pin on this side. Because I'm going to sew from here up to the point and then back down this way. So I want this pin to go in this way. Okay, so the third thing I'm going to sew is this. And then I'll have my horn and my ear done. Okay, so Hawk's going to come around. He'll show you what I'm sewing. Okay, so that you can do this later. We have polyester thread in here. I have a gray, and I always use gray, or almost always use gray, but you could totally use white. And then I have a special needle that's a stretch needle. See if we can get that to focus in there. Okay, so this is a 90-14 stretch, and you can see on the package that's what it says. And this is special for sewing knit fabric, and it works really, really well for cuddle. Okay, so that's the needle that I have in there. And then I have my polyester thread. And then I'm just going to use a straight stitch. I just need to get back over here. So it's just a straight stitch. And then I'm going to put this up to a 3 length. All right. And you might need to do a 3.5 or a 4, depending on your machine. And I can do it with a 3.
What's going on with that walking foot?
Oh, yeah. So this is a weird walking foot. And it's, it does something special. So let me show you guys. So back here, let's see if we can... where you guys can see it best. Can you see this little black part right here?
Not yet.
Okay, Hawk's going to come around here and see. So this little black thing, the way that it works, going to sneak behind you and let you show it, okay? So when I sew, that little black belt turns and it makes my fabric come through. Okay? So that works really well. You might have a walking foot that looks a little bit different and it will help pull your fabric through, but in the same sort of thing, as it helps your fabric come through it much easier. Okay? So I start sewing on this. That's going to make it easier to start here, because then it's not going to want to suck my point in. Okay? So I'm going to sew forward just a little bit. Then I'm going to lift my foot and I'm going to put this back here. Okay? Then I'll put this down. So this is back here, this little guy right here. And most machines, if I push it a little extra, it'll go even higher. Okay? Which is super cool. It makes it so you can get that thick fabric in there. All right, so I'm going to sew just a little bit. Then I'm going to back stitch, which is this button right here. Okay, so this is your back stitch button. That means it'll go in a U-turn. It'll go backwards. And that's what we want to do. Get that so that the stitches are kind of locked in there and they won't go anywhere. Okay, we're just going to sew it forward. And then I'm going to do the same thing. And then I'm going to sew this piece. Okay, and I'm just going to come in here and sew the next piece. This is what they call chain stitching. It works pretty well. So we're going to go forward just a few stitches. Then I'm going to back stitch a few stitches and then do it again. And I'm just going to follow this edge. My fabric is going to follow right along that line. And I'm just going to guide it with my fingers. Okay, and keep my fingers far away from the needle. Okay, nice and slow. And I'm going to turn it and go down the other side. And I don't want to sew over those pins because that'll hurt the machine and maybe me. Okay, all right. I'm going to cut my thread.
And you didn't sew that bottom edge.
I didn't. Yep, I left the bottom open on both the horn and the ear because now we're going to turn it. Okay, so I'm going to cut these apart. And this was just my little extra piece, so I'm going to put it to the side. Okay, and then I'm going to cut these so that these are a little bit smaller. Okay, which you can do, but you don't have to do. I'm going to cut off that big tail up at the top. Okay, because it was just a lot of extra fluff. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing. Cut along here. Make that just a little bit smaller. Okay, then what I can do, because I left that bottom open, I get to turn this inside out. Okay, and I'm just going to stuff my finger in there, push that through. Let me see if I can find, here we go. So I need something sort of pointy, but not too sharp to push that point out. Okay, so there is a little ear, perfect. Okay, now I'm going to do the same thing with this one. So one of the ways that I like to flip them inside out is I sort of grab them and then push it like this. Okay, and I can sort of push it out with my finger until it gets too far, and then I can push it with a tool. If you don't have one of these tools, you can use a chopstick, you can use a pencil. Okay, you can use lots of things to push that out. There we go. All right, so now we have an ear and a horn. Perfect. All right, so now we have, you're fine. Stay right there. Okay, so now what we have is we have our two bodies. Okay, so we have the body, and if you remember when we were cutting this out, then I wrote on here horn and ear. So now I know where they go. So my horn is going to go right there, and it should match pretty much in between those marks. Look at that. Perfect. Okay, so the way I'm going to put it on here is the seam. I'm going to put the seam, I want to say to the back, but toward the body, I guess.
Toward the ear. Toward the ear.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I'm going to put it toward the ear. So I'm going to put a little pin in here. And then I'm going to put a little pin over here. Okay, and I'm going to sew in between there. So I'm going to put a pin this direction too, because I want to hold it down nice and flat all the way in here. All right, and then I'm going to put the ear here. And if I look at the picture, so I do this a lot where I can see, like, okay, so the ear and the horn are right next to each other. Okay, so I'm going to put the ear right here. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing and pin those that way. And then I'm going to sew those on. Okay, and that way I don't have to have too many pins at a time. If you want to do your horn and sew it on and then put your ear and then sew it on, you could totally do that. I'm going to do both of these and I'm going to sew these on and then I'm going to put the mane on. Okay, so I'm just going to do this and I'll let you show. I'm going to do the big zigzag. Okay, you gonna come around?
Yep.
Okay, so I'm going to do the big zigzag, which is 5 wide and 5 long. So here's my measurements so that I can see how big it is. And I'm going to do this right on the edge just to hold it in place because I just want it to stay there while I do the extra part next. Okay, so I'm going to put my foot down here. I'm going to take that pin out so I don't sew on it. And then I'm just going to zigzag. Okay, and I'm doing that just so it'll stay where I want it to stay. And then I can take the pins out so that I don't stab myself any more than I have to. Okay, and then I cut my thread. Okay, and I'll show you next time if I remember how to cut your thread without that fancy thing. Okay, so now I've got an ear and a horn. Okay. Got those on there, and now I need to put my my mane on. Okay, so the mane, when it gets sewn on, we want it to look like this. So I need to sew it so that it will do that. Okay, so I'm actually going to put it on here, and I'm just going to kind of put it in place. Okay, and then I'm going to put the other one on top of it. Okay, I'm going to move that just a little because I want it to not hit the ear. I want it to be close, but not on the ear. Okay, so I'm going to put a pin there, and then I'm going to just pin these together all along this edge. Okay, and then if they don't match perfectly, it's okay. Okay, and I'm going to use a bunch of pins for this because it makes it easier to stay where I want it to. But you'll need to be careful not to stab yourself too much. Okay, and I'll show you the other little clips we have. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin and then I'll clip 2 in between to hold it. Okay, because Cuddle likes to move a lot, so we have to really keep it in place. Okay, and
so
I'm going to
started this fringe right up against the ear?
Mm-hmm. Yep, right by the ear. You can make it just a little bit away, but you want it to be as close as you can while still not overlapping. Okay. Let's try to get this all in place. And you can see sometimes I have to fidget with it. That's okay. We have a 3/8 inch seam allowance, okay? So that's usually about the edge of your walking foot, and that means that all of this where it's not quite perfect will just get hidden in there.
Why is this second layer of fringe upside down?
Oh, because when I turn it, it's a great question. So when I turn it, it's going to be this direction. So when these get sewn together and this flips over, these will actually flip this direction, so they'll both be up. Okay, so let me show you on here, because here's the finished version. So if I do this, you can see I have both sides that are facing each other. Ta-da! Okay, super cute. But that makes his hair do that fun thing there. Okay. I'll also show you how to get it to curl just a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing that I did before, and I'm going to zigzag the whole thing down so it'll stay. Okay, because for me, if I take it just one little step at a time, it's helpful and makes it a little bit easier to sew if I do that. So I'm going to put a few pins on, or clips on here. So these are Wonder Clips. They are really nice because they hold the fabric without being a pin. So it doesn't stab me.
It's like a little clothespin.
It's like a little bitty clothespin. Yep, exactly. So I'm going to hold these on there. Oops, I missed a spot. Okay, and then I'm going to go zigzag this on, and then I can get rid of those pins. And I'll sew the next part. Okay. Oh, we did. Okay. I'm gonna get rid of my pins because I have a special magnet pincushion. Okay, so now I'm still on the zigzag, and I'm gonna come in here and just zigzag this along the edge. Okay, and I'm just going right along the edge. I'm not going in the fabric at all. Okay, and if my fabric moves a little bit, it's okay because I can kind of stretch it a little bit and make it fit. And then if it gets off at the end, I just leave it. Okay, so we're just going to sew this down. See, super easy. Move the pins. So you can see here, it got a little bit off. I have a little bit of a pucker right here. And I'm just going to take both my pins out, and I'm going to let that grow a little bit. And it's okay. Okay, the way to make it not do that is to use all the pins, but we don't always want to do that. And it's okay if it messes up just a little. Okay, so now I've got my little fringe in there. Okay, so now I have to put an eyeball on. Okay, so now this is where his ear and his horn are. So now I have to figure out where his eyeball is going to be. Okay, her eyeball, maybe because it's a pink one, it should be a girl. The blue one was a boy. I don't know. Okay, let me see. I feel like I want to give it a purple eyeball, so it doesn't matter. All right. So there we go. So there's where I want my eyeball, basically. Okay. I want it to work like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my fabric. I have a little extra sheet that I have that I'm going to use for when I'm doing the spray. So you can use a little bit of glue. If I can find my glue stick, here it is. So this is one way you can do it, is with a little bit of glue stick. Okay, so you can see I use mine. It's kind of ugly and messy. So I just put a little bit of glue on here, and then I can take it over and I can stick its eye on. Okay, I can glue it like that, or I can use this other stuff. We're going to use this tomorrow too, is spray based. Okay, so this is like a spray glue that works really well for fabric and especially for the Cuddle fabric. The thing is with this is you have to be really careful and not use too much because it will get really messy if you use too much. Okay, so we're going to take the lid off and then I'm going to spray it. And you can show how much I'm going to spray because it's not going to be a lot. Okay, it looks like a lot, but you heard how long it took me to spray that. Not very long at all. Okay, so then I'm going to take it real careful and I'm going to bring it over here and I'm going to put it where I want it to be. Does that look good? Is that about right place?
I like it.
Okay, let's do it. Okay,
Smack it.
and then I get to hit it, which is always the fun part for me. Oops. All right. So then what you can do is you can stitch around it. In the pattern, she says that you could just do a big X over the eye, which you can, or you can stitch around it. I'm just going to stitch around it really quick just to show you how that works. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you both parts. I have to get this underneath there. So I'm going to do a big X with just a straight stitch across his eye. And what that does is just holds it in place. Okay, so I'm going to show you with the other part how you can do it a little fancier. Okay, so oops, I need to do a little back stitch thing there. Okay, and then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to do it the other direction. Okay, and that'll hold its eye pretty darn flat. Okay, so we'll be fine. This is the easy way of doing it. You could also hand stitch this if you wanted to, if you like sewing by hand. Okay, so that's one way. And even though I use the gray thread, you can't see it too much. And if I fluff it a little, it'll totally hide. Okay, ta-da, perfect. I'll cut those little threads in a second. Okay, all right, so then the other thing we can do is stitch all the way around the eye. And I like to do this with a little bitty zigzag so it holds down the edge better. You can do it with a straight stitch too, but I like a zigzag. So I'm gonna make this a little bigger. We're going to do 2.5 and 2.5, so kind of half of what we did before. Okay, so this part you have to do kind of slow because I got to turn it the whole way, which is why the straight stitch is just the easier way. But if you're comfortable sewing, this is a good way of doing it because it'll hold the whole thing down flat. Okay, and I'm just going to go nice and slow. Okay. I'm just going to come up that curve, and I'll turn it. Okay. Okay. While I'm here, I'm going to cut those threads so they can stay out of my way. All right.
And when you're turning it, you're leaving the needle down so that it stays put.
That's right, because if I pull my needle up, it's going to move all over the place. So I keep the needle down, and that's a setting you can do on your machine, or you can turn it. So if you show over here how I can turn it. So right here, I can turn it. So if I stop sewing and I want my needle to go down, I can put the needle down, and then I can pull it up. Okay, so that's just this little hand crank. We always turn it this way, always towards you. Okay, so now, and you can see, if you watch that, it should turn. Let's see if it'll do it while I sew. Is it turning?
It is, but it's not easy to see.
Not easy to see because it doesn't have a little hole on it. Yeah, like some of the other ones. Okay, so I'm just going to keep sewing all the way around, just nice and slow. Like I said, you can do a straight stitch if you want to, but the zigzag will hide better in the fabric. Okay, and keep my hands away from the needle and just keep turning it. So when it gets hard like this to turn, then I just lift it and I move it. So you can see I stuck a pin in there, and I did that to show me where I started so that I could figure out where it was that I had to stop. Okay, so now I know I'm going to stop around there. So I kind of just keep my eyeball on it. Okay, I'm going to do a little lock stitch that's on here. And then I will, I'll show you how to cut your thread on the side too. So a lot of times you can lift your thread. Mine has a special thing where I can cut it underneath. But if I bring it over here, this little guy is a thread cutter. Pink. Ta-da! Okay, so this right here, I'll show you again. So I pull the thread up, catch it in this little guy here, and give it a yank. Do it with my other hand. Whoops. We got two of us here. It makes it harder to do. Okay, so that's what that is. You just cut your threads. All right, so now I'm going to cut my thread here so I don't have any big tails. Okay, so you can see it looks kind of funny from this side, but it looks cute from this side. So see, there's his little eye. I can just kind of fluff this up. So if I want that to match, I can change my thread to black. Okay, clearly, I don't care if it matches. It's close enough. Okay, perfect. I always like to say my stuff is perfect, even though I know it's not perfect at all. And I'm like, oh, it's perfect. It's perfectly finished. That's what it is. Okay, so now I've got my piece here, and I've got my eyeball sewn on, and I've got my horn sewn on, and my ear sewn on, and now I need to sew the two pieces together. Okay, let me see. Okay, we're doing good. All right, so the other thing that we did is that I made a little mark here. So we didn't talk about that on that piece. And I'm going to show you again here. So this is the piece here on the pattern. So it made these little marks, right? This is for the gap. All right, and we're going to leave that so that when we sew this whole thing, that this is where we can turn it and then be able to sew that shut. So the next thing I need to do is pin the whole thing together so I can sew it. All right.
It's also where the stuffing goes, right?
It's where the stuffing goes into it. So what I like to do is get this laid out as neatly as possible. Okay. And if you keep it flat while you're doing this, it's going to be easier. Okay. If you try to hold this in your hands at all and do it, you're going to struggle. Okay. All right. Now look what I did. I didn't mark it on this side, so now I have to remark it. All right. Oops. It's on this. Nope, it's on this side. Darn it. So it'll be all upside down, backwards. Who knows? Okay. It's because I want to leave it on the back leg, basically, of the of the unicorn. I want to leave it on its back leg and not its front leg. You could do it on either one. It wouldn't be a mistake, but it'll be a little bit easier, I think, on this side. Okay, so I'm going to put a pin, and then what I like to do to make sure I know that this is where I start and where I stop is I put 2 pins right next to each other. Okay. All right, so then I'm going to put some pins in around it. Now, there's going to be a lot of pins in this, so you're going to have to be careful while you're sewing. Try not to stab yourself too much. Okay, I'm going to put a bunch of pins, and then I'm going to go in and I'm going to put a whole bunch more pins. There's going to be so many pins. But if I don't, what happens is it moves and then I get angry. Oh, we should show them the mood pillow, what we're making for the rest of the week. Speaking of angry Teresa. It's a pretty funny pillow. It's what happens when I get grumpy because things didn't work for me in my sewing. Okay, so when you're doing this part, make sure that all of your little hair pieces are coming in and none of them are flipping out over here. All right, and make sure that those are tucked inside. Okay, and this is a lot that we're going to have to pin through, so it's a lot of layers. So you need good pins. These are my favorites, and these are clover pins. Let me see if I have the, I don't see the package. I had it. Oh, here it is. Here's the little package. These are the pins that I like the best. They're really nice and strong, and they'll get through all of these layers. Because like right here, I have 4 layers of fabric. And that's the way all of these are going to be, is because through that horn and through the ear, it's all a bunch of fabric. So you want to make sure that it's going to be flat and sewing evenly. So I can see I got a little bit off there. So I'm going to fix it. Okay. And that happens. I have to fix things all the time.
With this curve, the pins are better than the clips, right?
Yeah, because we're going really far. We need the pins because the pins hold it a lot better. And so, yeah, we're going to use more of the pins on this for sure. The clips I like when it's not too long. Okay, I'm going to put some extra pins right there in that curve because that curve is going to need to go nice and slow. Okay, so you can see this is a little bit puffy and kind of weird right here, but that'll be fine when we sew it. Okay, so I'm going to put some more pins down here so I can get around that curve okay. And then we're just going to sew around the whole thing. So this will take you a little while. I can sew pretty fast, so it's going to go pretty quick for me, but when you sew it, take it nice and slow. All right, these curves are... it's a good place to practice because you get to do like inside curves and outside curves. So you get 2 of these like kind of tight curves. You get a really, really tight little curve here, but a big curve here. So when I start, I'm going to start here and I'm going to go all the way around and I'm going to finish with this tight curve. Mostly because I know that that's going to be the hardest part. So I want to do that after I had some practice. Okay. All right, so we're going to take this over to the machine, and so one more time, I'm going to show you one little trick that I have at the corner that'll make it a little bit easier. If that seems hard for you, you don't have to do it. Okay, so I'm going to take my pins and I'm going to put them this way for just a minute so I can see them a little bit better. And I can leave them in while I put this in the machine. So I'm going to put this in the machine. I'm going to put my foot down. I'm going to change this back to a straight stitch. Okay, and then I'm going to take my pins out because I don't want to run over them. Okay, so now I've got this. I can crank this, put my needle down. Now I'm going to sew just a couple little stitches, and then I'm going to sew back a couple little stitches, and I'm going to sew back again. Okay, and that might seem weird, but it will help me later so that when I turn it, it can turn easily. Okay, so this is important, is we're going to sew nice and slow around these curves, and then you're going to take the pins out as you go. Okay, so when you're sewing, I want you to sew this faster, slower. All right.
You're making the machine run with your foot.
I am. I'm pushing on it with my foot. Right down here. Here's my foot. Look, I'm wearing shoes today. Okay, so I'm pushing on this nice and slow. This spot right here, this might be on your machine, and this is super cool because this lets me sew really fast or really slow. So if I put it way down, I can push my foot all the way to the ground, sew as fast as I can, and that's what it's gonna do. Okay, so I can also turn it. So if I turn it up the speed a little bit to the 2 arrows, okay, then I can sew this fast. Okay, so I can sew nice and fast with that one, but you want to sew slow, so you can totally turn this down, and then it won't let you go too fast, because when you go fast, that's when it's easy to lose control. You can't figure out where you're sewing, you sew off the edge. Okay, so I can turn it all the way up because I've got lots of practice, and sew really fast. But sewing slower, especially when you're learning, and especially when you're sewing with Cuddle and you're just starting to sew with it, it'll make it a lot easier if you do. Okay, we're going to sew all the way around, and you can see I just kind of push this with my hand to make it go where I want it to go. So I use both my hands to try to guide it in that circle, the curve. Okay. And I'll go back over and check and make sure I caught everything, because if I didn't, I'm just going to sew it again. Okay. So I'm going to come around here. So this is where we have a nice tight curve here. I've got my ears and my horn. Okay. So I'm going to sew around this bottom curve. Okay, and I got a lot of pins, so I'm going to clean some of those up so they don't get in my way so much. Okay, and you can see I just take them out before I get to each one of them. So if you're sewing, I have practice, so I can just like take them out quickly as I go. But you could sew along to here, and then you stop, and then you take your pin out, and then you sew some more, and then you stop and take your pin out. Okay, so make sure that those pins are coming out. And if you're sewing too fast, it's really easy to make them stay in too long. So now I've got that really tight corner right here. Okay, so this is that inside curve. So I can pull this over just a little bit, but I'm gonna let it still curve a lot. Okay, and I'm gonna take my time with this corner, make sure my pins all come out. Okay, and that way I can make sure it goes smooth around the corner, and then I don't have to stop and start too much in like funny ways. Okay, so slower is better. Okay, so now I remember these 2 pins means that that's where I have to stop. Okay, so I'm gonna just sew nice and slow around there. Okay, I can feel mine is getting stuck back here, so I'm gonna move it so it stops being stuck. And I'm gonna take those pins out, and then I'm gonna turn them and do the same thing that I did before, where I sew off the edge. Okay. So now I'm going to take this. So I lifted the foot in the back. Okay, I lifted that up, and then I'm going to turn this whole thing, set it back down again, and then I'm going to sew and back stitch and sew off. Okay, so then I can cut my thread. Now I get to look at it and see, did it work? Okay, so all along here, I can look at my zigzags, and all of that stitching that I did is inside until I get to right here. And then I have a couple little stitches that got on the other side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back over and I'm going to stitch so that that gets covered. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch so that it goes here, and I'm going to draw it so that I know which line to follow, so that I catch all of that in there. Okay, so that's the line I'm going to stitch on. If you're having a hard time stitching with the side of your foot, you can usually draw a line on this fabric and then just follow the line. And that works really easy too. Okay, so I'm going to stitch a little, back stitch a little, and then I'm going to go forward and just follow. So I'm going to look at that line while I'm sewing so that it can catch the line. And I'll hide all those zigzags inside. Okay, Then I can just go over it again where I sewed before, just to make sure that my, come on, guy, backstitch. There we go. Okay, and then I make sure and caught everything. Okay, so now I know it all got caught. It's good. I can leave this stitching. I'm just totally going to leave it there. I don't care. Okay, the one thing I'm going to do here before I turn it is I'm going to clip these curves. Okay, so when I'm cutting this, I'm going to be really careful not to cut my stitches. Okay, so I'm just using the very end of my scissors just to cut right up to the line, but not through the line. Okay, and I'm just going to do it one side at a time because that's easier.
That was just a regular old ballpoint pen, right?
Yep.
Yep.
Yep, just a regular old pen.
On the black for the eyes, you used a silver Sharpie.
Exactly. Exactly. Yep. Okay, so now I've got that. So now I can bend it open, and that's what has to happen. Okay, so all of these, I can also trim them. Okay, we're going to trim on one side and not the other. We'll see what happens. Okay, so these I'm going to cut little triangles out because this needs to come this way. Okay, so it gives the space for it to sort of curve around that. And I'm cutting one side and then I cut the other side. Okay, and that's a little bit easier because the two layers can get kind of thick. Okay.
And also you really don't want to cut that.
You really don't want to cut your thread because if you cut your thread, what do you got to do again? Sew it one more time. And if you don't re-sew it, then you get a hole in your pillow, and that's even worse. Okay. All right. So now, so this one I'm going to leave so we can see if it makes a difference. Okay. So this one I'm going to leave too because this one I know it didn't make any difference because I left it totally on the other one. So now I've got a little hole in here. Okay. This is my little gap. And what I can do here is turn it inside out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here. I'm going to feed it all onto my thumb here. And then I'm going to kind of push this with my hand. Push it to here. And then I think this is kind of its nose. Yep, and there's his eyeball. And then he could just come right out. Okay, just keep pulling and pulling and pulling until it comes out. And then I can stick my hand in there and I can push out all of the edges that I sewed. Okay, so now I can push out all of those edges, make sure everything comes out, that there's no holes, that I didn't miss anything. Okay, all right, ta-da! Okay, look at that cute little guy. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stuff it. Let me see what we're looking at. Okay, oh good, we did it. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stuff it, and then I'm going to just sew this shut. So you can see what I did here. Is this just where I did those little corners? It just turns inside right here. Okay, so I'm going to stuff it through this hole. I didn't have stuffing right here. Okay. Let me look in that little compartment. Sorry. Sorry, guys. So I'm going to use stuffing, and I'm just going to stuff it full. One of the things you want to do when you have the stuffing is you got to kind of move it a little bit and then stick it in the hole. And then you're just going to shove it all around. You're just going to keep adding more and more and more, and then you're going to sew that shut. And in the pattern, she shows you how to sew it shut. You could sew it with just a hand sewing needle, and you could just sew it shut, or you could sew it on the sewing machine. It'll probably be easier to hand sew it, okay? But you're just going to fluff your stuffing just a little bit. Put it inside and keep going. So this one, when I did it before, it took almost a whole big bag of this. And this is 12 ounces, okay? So 12 ounces will stuff this really nicely. All right, so you're just going to stuff that thing, sew it shut, ta-da, you're finished. Okay, and then you end up having a very cute little guy. Oh, I was going to show you one more thing, and then we'll end. Okay, so the other thing is that when you have this mane, okay, when you have these little guys, if you pull them, they start to kind of twist up a little bit. So you can kind of get rid of your frustration that way, and they'll sort of start to bend, okay? So you can just do that, and they'll keep doing it. So these will twist better because they're on a bias. So you can see they get kind of curly. And they end up sort of falling out, but then you just do it again. So you can just kind of twist them, and that will make them so that they hang a little bit better on here. Okay? So you can do that, and then you're finished, and then you have a cute little travel pillow, just like this. Okay? Perfect. Ready to go. Good for naps. Okay, good for car trips. If you're going camping somewhere, it's a great thing to take in the car with you. She also has a pattern for a dragon in there too. So you can make a unicorn or a dragon. Either one. You could make this a horse if you didn't put the horn on it. You do all sorts of fun things. Okay, so lots and lots of things you can do. All right, so we have winners, and they are, if I can get my little thing to come up. So we have Heather from Sacramento, Kathy from Oshkosh, Wisconsin. That's a hard thing to say. Judy from Ocean Shores, Washington. Oh, Ocean Shores, I know that place. Kenda from Alexandria, Virginia, and Veronica from Santa Maria, California. So we'll get a hold of you. We'll send you the pattern. We'll send you the goodies. We'll send you the little merit badges, all of that good stuff, so you can make a little pillow just like this. We'll be back tomorrow. We're going to be making a little Pop-Tart bag. Hold on half a sec. Let me show you. Hang on. Okay, we're going to make this version. Okay, so we're going to make the little Pop-Tart bag tomorrow. Okay, super duper cute. This pattern, I'm going to put this down so you guys can see that. Okay, there's also another version in the pattern. So this is the one we'll make, but you can also do this cute little waffle version. Okay, so if you look at the blog, if you go to shannonfabrics.com and go to the blog, you can get all the information on the fabrics that you're going to need. And we're going to do a little bit more gluing tomorrow, some sewing. We're going to talk about zippers and all sorts of fun stuff. So join us tomorrow morning at 10. Is there anything else in there?
Quick about washing. Can you wash it?
Oh, you can absolutely wash it. So yes, what I like to do when I'm washing pillows is throw it into like a bigger pillowcase or a lingerie bag, and put it in there so it doesn't get banged around too much. But I like to put it in a pillowcase, wash it, and then you can just totally wash it in warm water, cool dryer, and yeah, totally fine. The biggest thing is the stuffing, and you'll want to make sure that you kind of fluff it back up again, okay? Otherwise, we'll be back again tomorrow. We're going to make a cute little bag, and yeah, we're going to have fun some more. All right, thanks so much, guys. Happy sewing.